Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. Parts of Florida see snow for the second year in a row. An Arctic blast is hitting much of the country, sending temperatures plummeting this week.
At least 39 people dead after a high-speed train collision in Spain. Spain's transport minister is calling the incident extremely strange.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calls Greenland essential to U.S. security as President Trump threatens new tariffs and European leaders push back.
Federal government is investigating after anti-ICE protesters disrupt worship at a church in Minnesota. Plus, the mayor of Minneapolis responds to reports President Trump is mobilizing the military to aid in immigration enforcement.
The Trump administration, meanwhile, investigating race-based housing programs in Minneapolis. This coming amid the onset of several other investigations into alleged fraud and taxpayer-funded programs.
In a wild NFL playoff finish, it sends the Rams to the NFC title game, while college football gets one of the most unexpected championship matchups ever this evening.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today's Monday, January 19th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, a rare burst of winter weather bringing snow to parts of Florida for the second year in a row.
Unbelievable. Snow briefly fell across the western Florida Panhandle early yesterday.
It didn't last long, though. The flakes did not stick to roads and quickly melted away, luckily. Last January, some of the same areas got up to 8 inches of snow, the most many places got since the late 1800s.
Yesterday's snowfall was part of a broader winter storm affecting much of the country. Further north, forecasters are warning of dangerously cold temperatures over the next few days. Across the northern plains, a strong Arctic blast is bringing sub-zero temperatures and frigid wind chills. And along the Great Lakes and Northeast, heavy lake effect snow is expected through the week. Forecasters warn the strong winds sweeping in could be the coldest of the season.
And an extreme cold snap is expected to hit New York City this week. Forecasters say real field temps could drop below 0 degrees, and the cold could last till the end of the month.
Hundreds of flights were canceled across New York and New Jersey, and snowstorms descended on the region. New York City warned residents be watchful for signs of hypothermia. The city's public health system warned anyone experiencing hypothermia symptoms, including shivering, increased heart rate, mental confusion, frostbite, or blisters on fingers, they must seek medical care immediately.
And in other news, at least 39 people are dead in Spain after a high-speed train collision yesterday.
Dozens are also injured after a train jumped the tracks and hit an oncoming train. Spain's Minister of Transport called the incident extremely strange.
The
accident is extremely strange. It happened on a straight stretch of track. All the railway experts who have been here today at this center and those we have been able to consult are extremely surprised by the accident because, as I say, it is strange, very strange. It is very difficult to explain at this point.
The collision happened when the tail end of a train with some 300 passengers went off the rails near Cordoba. Rescue efforts were still underway as of this morning.
Spain's defense ministry said in a post that nearly 40 military personnel and around 15 vehicles had been mobilized to aid in this rescue. More than 200 trains between Madrid and southern Spain have now been canceled. The death toll is the highest from a train crash going back to 2013, when a train derailed and burst into flames, killing 80 and injuring another 145.
And our thoughts are certainly with the families and friends of all of those victims. Over in Iran, the president there said yesterday that any attack on the supreme leader would be equivalent to an all-out war against Iran.
Iran also indicated it might go ahead with the execution of people detained. Here's more on that story.
Iran's president warned on Sunday that any U.S. strike would trigger a harsh response from Tehran after an Iranian official in the region said at least 5,000 people, including about 500 security personnel, had been killed in nationwide protests. Sparked last month in Tehran's Grand Bazaar over economic grievances, the protests swiftly turned political and spread nationwide. The protests drew participants from across generations and income groups calling for the end of clerical rule. Protests dwindled last week following a violent crackdown. President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to intervene if protesters continued to be killed on the streets or were executed. Trump said in an interview with Politico on Saturday, quote, "It's time to look for new leadership in Iran." Iran indicated on Sunday it might go ahead with the execution of people detained during the unrest, and with its clerical rulers facing mounting international pressure over the bloodiest unrest since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, is seeking to deter Trump from stepping in. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian on X warned that Tehran's response, quote, "to any unjust aggression will be harsh and regrettable." He added that any attack on the country's supreme leader is, quote, "tantamount to an all-out war against the nation." The Iranian official told Reuters that the verified death toll was unlikely to increase sharply, adding that those taking to the streets had been supported and equipped by, quote, "Israel and armed groups abroad." The clerical establishment regularly blames unrest on foreign enemies. U.S.-based rights group HRANA said on Saturday the death toll has surpassed 3,300, with nearly 4,400 cases under review. The group said that more than 24,000 arrests had been
Greenland continues to be a global focal point this week. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent calling the island essential to national security in an interview yesterday.
NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that and the response from European leaders after President Trump threatened new tariffs.
President Trump has continued to exert pressure on Europe in his quest to acquire Greenland. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent discusses why that is crucial, speaking on NBC's Meet the Press.
President Trump strongly believes that we cannot outsource our security because, Kristen, let me tell you what will happen, and it might not be next year, might not be in 5 years, but down the road, this fight for the Arctic is real.
Bessent says if there were an attack on Greenland from Russia or from some other area, the U.S. would get dragged in.
So better now, peace through strength, make it part of the United States, and there will not be a conflict because the United States right now, we are the hottest country in the world. We are the strongest country in the world. The Europeans project weakness. The U.S. projects strength.
President Trump wrote on Truth Social that NATO has been telling Denmark for 20 years to get the Russian threat away from Greenland. The president says world peace is at stake, arguing that China and Russia want Greenland and there's nothing Denmark can do about it. The president also criticized Danish defenses in Greenland, saying they amounted to having 2 dog sleds with one being added recently. President Trump said on Saturday that he's planning to add a 10% tariff onto Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland, starting on February 1st. The levy would increase to 25% on June 1st, unless a deal is reached for the complete and total purchase of Greenland. European Union leaders held an emergency meeting yesterday over the tariff threat. EU Council President Antonio Costa said EU leaders have expressed readiness to defend themselves against any form of coercion. Costa is expected to convene a full summit of EU leaders later this week. Norway's foreign minister said they stand with the Kingdom of Denmark in defense of its sovereignty.
But we're also ready to do more together with America and with all our allies in the Arctic. And that's exactly why we are stepping up our presence in Greenland, because if there are security concerns, we can meet them jointly.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer wrote on X that Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and its future is a matter for the Greenlanders and the Danes. He also said NATO and allies should all do more together to address the threat from Russia across different parts of the Arctic. French President Emmanuel Macron called the tariffs unacceptable, saying no intimidation or threat will influence them. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said yesterday that he spoke with Trump regarding the security situation in Greenland and the Arctic, and that he looks forward to seeing him in Davos later this week. Meanwhile, the 8 European nations on Trump's tariff list have sent a small military presence to Greenland, intended to bolster Arctic security as a shared transatlantic interest, saying the deployment poses no threat to anyone. The White House said last week that the deployment of European troops in Greenland has not changed President Trump's mind on acquiring the island. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And joining us to discuss the tensions over Greenland, we welcome Kervin Oquin. Good to have you with us this morning, Kervin.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
Certainly. Now, let's just begin with the basics. How important is Greenland to the U.S.?
Well, not just to the U.S., but to the Arctic in general, right? So, I think President Trump is correct to say that Greenland is it's a large strategic location that Russia wants.
Oh, Kervin, I'm sorry. I seem not to be able to hear you too well.
Sorry about that.
Get you a bit closer? Yeah,
Am I coming
perfect.
through okay?
That's better. Thank you. So, yeah, please, the importance to the Arctic in general.
Yes, Greenland is extremely important as a strategic location to the U.S., to NATO. It is part of NATO, being a part of Denmark. But I do think this is very much important to Russia and to China because of the sheer amount of resources within the region. And there's a huge push right now for Russia, China, and the United States to get to those strategic resources. What I would say is that while Greenland is very important to the United States, the way that this administration is going about trying to gain that area is a way that seems similar to something that Russia and Vladimir Putin would do.
And President Trump has forecast perhaps Russia or another or an adversary may want to just go ahead and try to take it as well. How likely is that scenario?
Yeah, I think if Europe and NATO continues to seem weak, like they have seemed with Ukraine and not supporting Ukraine enough, or if Russia were to extend their plans past Ukraine and into somewhere like Finland or Poland, then I think Greenland would definitely be next. I think Russia would, and the data shows that Russia would make a play for somewhere else. And during that play, if NATO does not come to the defense through Article 5, they would go after Greenland. It is a sitting target. It is just as the president has said, it is not secure enough if Russia, God forbid, China tries to make a play for that area.
And there have been some disputed accounts of what's going on currently around the island. Obviously, President Trump has been saying that Chinese and Russian ships are already encircling it, among other levels of influence. How do you see it? What's the evidence pointing to?
Well, the evidence shows that there are assets in the region, both Russian and Chinese assets. I don't know if encircling is the term that I would use here. I don't know that they are a year or 2 years away from making a play at Greenland, but they do have resources, naval assets in the region that if they wanted to, if they saw a chance to make a play at it, they might do that. But I think it's very dangerous, especially right now. And what I think is happening right now is Russia sitting back, mainly President Putin, and is letting this all play out because now he sees we've got a weak NATO. We have a United States that's becoming more aggressive towards those NATO assets. So he is enjoying this time while they are basically being distracted from what's going on in Ukraine with all this talk about Greenland.
No, that's a fair point. What do you think the effects will be of these threatened tariffs on the countries who are standing in the way of or currently publicly opposing President Trump's plan for Greenland?
Well, what always bothers me is we have a ton of leaders in Europe and within the United States who want to go back and forth on levying tariffs on each other that really do not affect the leaders and the wealthy in those countries. And it affects your regular people on the ground there from those countries. So they will continue to levy these attacks through tariffs, through economic warfare. And that's going to hurt the people of those countries. And I think that's going to hurt. I think it's going to hurt the Republicans and the Trump administration in elections coming up soon. And it's going to hurt European leaders in elections that are coming up soon as well.
So in terms of the overall priorities of the U.S. And the free world, say. A Middle East expert that we spoke with last week said the U.S.'s top focus should be on building the Golden Dome, missile defense, and space dominance. One of those does involve Greenland, at least one of those. How would you rank the various major threats for the West right now, in light of what you've said about Russia and Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East right now, various threats? Of course, there's the Indo-Pacific and resources already being directed away from there in order to try to deal with what's happening in Iran.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So what's the biggest threat to the currently to the West? I would say is a more aggressive Russia, because that is on the doorsteps of Western Europe. So particularly in the West and Europe, Russia's the biggest threat. I think China is the biggest threat to the United States economically, militarily. This is a peer adversary that is getting into the region. That's why we saw what we saw in Venezuela recently with the removal of President Maduro. This is all aimed at China, right? So China's into the Arctic in Greenland. I would agree that that space is that next frontier and that major dangerous point where Russia and China are trying to gain an advantage. And oh, by the way, there is a U.S. base in Greenland, and it is a Space Force base in Greenland. I think that is what the United States and the Trump administration should be doing, is reinforcing that U.S. military base there and increasing their space, whether it's space exploration or space defense, through what you mentioned, through the Golden Dome.
And so in your view, are you saying that the U.S. may not need to own Greenland to build up Trump's Golden Dome missile shield?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've thought all this time. I understand the strategic value of Greenland, but I also understand the strategic value of working with your partners. And I think I think President Trump wants to spend billions of dollars to acquire Greenland. You can spend far less U.S. taxpayer dollars to expand your military presence through the support of your European allies in order to build out that area and work with the European allies to deter places like Russia and China. The biggest deterrence to Russia and China is going to be an allied NATO front and an allied Indo-Pacific front. That is going to be the biggest deterrent.
So while this is currently a hot topic and remains a key focus right now, is there anything that's missing from the conversation about security and about Greenland that you think should be foregrounded more?
Yeah, I think not enough people are talking about the resources that are within Greenland that can be shared among allied nations. And then I do think there's a lot of talk about Russia and that Russia being too aggressive, and not enough talk about what China is trying to do in the region there and how to deter those adversaries from actually making a play onto the land. And the last thing I'll say is, let's let the people of Greenland decide what they want to do. And that's not just that's not just to President Trump or the United States. I'm talking to Denmark as well. Look, we're trying to move away from this age of colonialism that people want to talk about right now, and Denmark does not get brought up in that a lot. Why do they own the Greenland? They should be, the people of Greenland should be able to do what they want with their land and accept the freedoms that they want.
Well, it's great to hear your thoughts on this morning, and your expertise weighing in on this. It's always good to have your insights. Thank you so much. Kervin Oquin, the host of the This Week Explained podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you, and stay safe out there.
Business and political elites are heading to the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos this week. President Trump is also set to appear there. Trump will be bringing with him the largest U.S. delegation ever. It includes the Secretaries of State, Treasury, Commerce, and Energy. Topping the agenda is finding a solution to the conflict in Gaza and Ukraine.
President Trump will also have discussions with European leaders. There will also be 400 other political leaders. So we do hope for a dialogue and also finding a path forward on Gaza, on Ukraine, but also how we can enhance collaboration even in this very complicated world.
Other topics of discussion include the possibility of China invading Taiwan and tensions in the Middle East as the protests in Iran continue. Trump is also expected to address his economic policy. The CEO of the World Economic Forum said that Trump's presence highlights the importance of cooperation between the private sector and countries which have become more and more indebted.
Still to come, anti-ICE protesters disrupted church service in St. Paul, Minnesota.
And how local officials are responding as reports emerge about the possibility of the U.S. military in the state of Minnesota.
The Trump administration is investigating race-based housing programs in Minneapolis. It comes amid the onset of several other investigations into alleged fraud in taxpayer-funded programs. More on that after this. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. A federal investigation is underway after anti-ICE protesters stormed a church in St. Paul, Minnesota.
The incident took place yesterday during worship at the Baptist Church. Here's more on that.
This Sunday morning at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota was not like any other. During worship, a group of protesters stormed the Baptist church, chanting "Justice for Renee Good," in reference to the woman fatally shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis after she drove her car into him. In a video circulating online, the protesters said they targeted the church because of allegations one of its pastors was connected to ICE. The pastor in question is David Easterwood, which is the same name listed as acting director of the ICE field office in St. Paul. NTD reached out to ICE to verify whether these are the same individual. ICE shared a video of the protest from the Center for Baptist Leadership saying, "Agitators aren't just targeting our officers, now they're targeting churches too." In a post on X, Attorney General Pam Bondi said yesterday the Department of Justice is investigating the incident. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, who leads the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, said her department is looking at potential violations. She said the protesters were desecrating a house of worship and interfering with Christian worshipers. The incident comes as tensions over immigration enforcement in Minnesota rise. Speaking to Fox News Sunday, Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons once again warned elected officials not to spread rhetoric that could put agents in danger.
So we started seeing this back in April, and I sent up the flare and started asking, elected officials not to stoke such dangerous rhetoric about ICE. And now exactly, you are seeing exactly what you just said. You're seeing attacks on ICE officers and our other federal partners for only going out there and doing their law enforcement mission.
As protests, sometimes violent, grow, Reuters reported yesterday the Pentagon has ordered 1,500 active-duty soldiers to prepare for a possible deployment to Minnesota. The outlet cited two officials, though the Pentagon hasn't made any statements itself. President Trump has previously said he could invoke the Insurrection Act to quell unrest, enabling the federal government to send in the U.S. military. The mayor of Minneapolis called the idea of sending in soldiers a, quote, ridiculous and unconstitutional idea. Mayor Jacob Fry said the city will not be intimidated.
This act was clearly designed to intimidate the people of Minneapolis. And here's the thing. We're not going to be intimidated. If the goal here is safety, we've got many mechanisms to achieve safety. And the best way to get safety is not to have an influx of even more agents, and in this case, military, in Minneapolis.
Meanwhile, Governor Tim Walz has mobilized the Minnesota National Guard. In a post on X Saturday, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety wrote, "The Guard troops are ready to help support public safety and the rights of all who assemble peacefully." The troops aren't deployed yet, but the state says they will wear bright yellow reflective vests to distinguish them from other agencies like ICE. The federal government continues to defend its immigration enforcement operations. In an interview with CBS Sunday, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said the vast majority of those arrested by ICE are convicted criminals or have criminal charges.
Every single individual has committed a crime, but 70% of them have committed or have charges against them on violent crimes.
In a video posted by ICE, an agent confronted by protesters in Minnesota says he and other agents are there to arrest a child sex offender.
We're here to arrest a child sex offender. And you guys are out here honking.
Oh, no, we're pressed. We're not
That
honking.
vehicle right there is honking and impeding our investigations while we're trying to arrest a child sex offender. That's who you guys are protecting.
Noem said the Trump administration is committed to arresting and deporting the worst of the worst from America's communities. In a post on X, Immigration and Customs Enforcement wrote, "We won't be deterred. ICE isn't going anywhere."
And federal investigations into Minnesota are expanding. Now the Trump administration is investigating race-based housing programs in Minneapolis.
It comes amid the onset of several other investigations into alleged fraud in taxpayer-funded programs. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more updates.
Minnesota State Governor is under the microscope. The Trump administration is investigating whether the race-based housing programs in Minneapolis violate the Civil Rights Act. HUD officials are taking issue with the Minneapolis 2040 plan, which aims to prioritize housing resources to people of color, indigenous people, and/or immigrants. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Scott Turner accused the mayor of racial favoritism. In a letter to the city's mayor, he wrote, "Specifically, Minneapolis has committed to making available and allocating housing resources based on race and nationality. This is in addition to the alleged wasted taxpayer dollars meant for housing programs."
Through our fraud prevention, we have found that there is likely over $84 million in eligible assistance that was given to the state of Minnesota during the Biden administration, including almost $500,000 in improper assistance to over 500 dead tenants. And so you think about that.
Governor Walz and Mayor Frey have not yet responded to the investigation. The HUD crackdown comes amid several other investigations into Minnesota programs. Independent journalist Nick Shirley continues to travel around in an attempt to expose fraudulent daycares.
Is Hopkins Child Care Center. They're receiving over $2 million a year. Where are the children? No footprints of any children around here. No footprints of any children. They can't even answer the question.
Medicaid and Medicare funds to the state also under scrutiny. The CMS director, Dr. Mehmet Oz, told American thought leader Jan Jekielek the fraud could in fact run deep into our political dynamics.
This might be part of a much larger scheme to change how we elect our officials, and that is very chilling for us. What we're seeing in Minnesota is the tip of the iceberg because it is dwarfed by what I saw in California, which is whole-scale cultural malfeasance around healthcare.
Oz said he believes foreign-based gangs are perpetuating fraud in hospice and home health care programs. California is one of the 5 states where the Trump administration has frozen federal funding for social net programs while it investigates alleged fraud. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And President Trump says he plans to sue JPMorgan Chase.
He accuses the bank of improperly cutting off his own access to financial services after the January 6, 2021 Capitol breach.
Trump wrote on Truth Social that the debanking was politically motivated. He argues it followed what he called a justified protest. He also repeated his assertion that the 2020 election was rigged.
JPMorgan pushed back, saying it does not close accounts based on political beliefs, and it would not comment on specific clients. Trump also denied a Wall Street Journal report that he offered JPMorgan's CEO a role as chair of the Federal Reserve, calling the claim untrue.
The dispute comes amid renewed scrutiny of political debanking practices across major U.S. banks. Meanwhile, British politicians and hundreds of protesters gathered to oppose China's proposed mega embassy in London Saturday. If the project is approved, it would give China its biggest embassy in Europe.
Protesters are speaking up about the risks of transnational repression and national security, given the site's proximity to sensitive financial data cables. NTD's Malcolm Hudson has more from London.
Hundreds of people gather in protest outside Royal Mint Court, the proposed site of a new Chinese mega embassy in London. Now, people are here for 2 reasons. The first being that last week it was revealed that the Chinese plan to expand basement rooms at this site close to highly sensitive fiber optic cables connecting London's 2 financial centres. And the second reason being that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer plans to go to China in the coming days, and so we're expecting the decision over whether this embassy will go ahead or not. Protesters held flags and banners chanting "No Mega Embassy." Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch called for the British government to stop the proposed mega embassy amid serious concerns about China.
Whether it's spying, disrupting a lot of our services, issues with trade, the harassment of British nationals with connections to China, the harassment of the people of Hong Kong. There's so much that we're concerned about.
The Telegraph newspaper reported that the plans for the site, located near the touristic Tower of London, include 208 secret rooms and a hidden chamber. Critics fear the secret basement rooms could be used to detain dissidents who have fled from the Chinese regime. Hong Kong activist Chloe Chung is based in London and has a $1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty on her head. That's around $130,000. She says she fears for her safety.
Giving China the biggest embassy in Europe is kind of saying that, okay, you can do whatever you want in this country, you can harass people here, you can sanction our MP, we don't care and we're going to give you this embassy. That is the wrong signal to send to the Chinese Communist Party.
Royal Mint Court is also between the financial hubs, the City of London and Canary Wharf. The proposed hidden chamber would be located in close proximity to data cables said to be crucial for financial sector communications. Human rights activist Benedict Rogers said this is deeply concerning.
You can't imagine it's a coincidence that the Chinese apparently are building these rooms right above these cables. It's been reported that they're going to tear down a wall that separates the rooms from the cables, presumably so that they can hack into them. And that seems to me an extremely dangerous situation.
The decision on whether to approve the Chinese embassy plans has been repeatedly pushed back by the government. Ministers have promised to make a decision by January 20th, ahead of Starmer's expected visit to China. Last November, prominent US lawmakers wrote to the British Foreign Secretary urging the UK to deny approval. They said the close proximity to critical communication cables could jeopardize intelligence sharing between the UK, the United States, and other Five Eyes partners. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Chants of mega embassy, mega mistake, don't bow to China, and no mega embassy echoed through the site. Demonstrators were warned that Chinese police officers may have blended in among the crowd.
Wow. The British government is expected to rule on the proposal on Tuesday, though local residents have already signaled they'll challenge any approval in court.
Moving on now, today, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but last Thursday marked the iconic civil rights leader's actual birthday.
Born on January 15th, 1929, Martin Luther King Jr. would be 97 years old.
King's involvement with the civil rights movement dates back to the 1950s.
He led the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 after Rosa Parks famously refused to give up her seat to a white passenger.
King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, the same year the Civil Rights Act was passed, before getting assassinated in his Memphis, Tennessee in 1968.
King's birthday is celebrated on a Monday, and that's due to the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which calls for certain federal holidays to occur on Mondays to provide long weekends. And coinciding with Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a group referring to themselves as New York Educators for Palestine is organizing and promoting an event aimed at 6 to 18-year-olds for a, quote, Palestinian teach-in. To discuss this, I spoke with Aaron Boxer. He's a former special education teacher and the CEO of Diversified Education Services. I asked him his thoughts on the planned teach-in.
Yes, as you pointed out, there is this faction of educators that are promoting on MLK Day this Palestine teach-in for students ages 6 to 18. So they're as young as 6 years old. And it's framed around lessons on Palestinian history and then the origins of Zionism. And then some of the later sessions are focused on Palestinian resistance. It's also claiming the event is being boosted by this caucus that's connected to the teachers union. It's directly in the New York City DOE. And then critics like myself, we call it political indoctrination because you're targeting kids as young as 6 years old. And then one has to question, why are they having this on a day off from school, but it's still affiliated with the New York City Department of Education? It calls into question, why is this happening?
And I think there tends to be some blurred lines, as you point out, because the group is not sanctioned by the Department of Education nor allowed to hold events on school property. Yet, being that they are educators and they are affiliated with the teachers union, as you point out, it does create sort of an appearance of some kind of sanctioned from the teachers union or from educators. So what do you make of that?
Yes, you can't differentiate the two, right? And parents are asking schools, they're not asking schools to avoid these hard topics. They work on and they look at current events, but it's asking schools to not turn children into political instruments. So when it's coming directly from a faction of the DOE, you have to start asking really hard questions. If something needs loaded language or secrecy or a rally vibe for little kids, it's probably not education. And on MLK Day especially, honor MLK, right? By teaching unity and nonviolence, equality, even civil disagreement, not by pushing kids to pick sides. And when you do this on a day off from school, sometimes you can look at these government schools as daycare. Who's going to send their child to something that says Palestinian teach-in, right? So there has to be a lot of clarification on who's bringing this up and why is this happening now? And we have to look at who's at Gracie Mansion. We have a new governor who supports the Palestinian movement. So there's a lot to be discussed here.
Aaron, MLK, of course, advocated for a colorblind society and one based on merit. This seems like it has the overtones of what might be referred to as critical race theory. Do you find any irony in that? And what do you think about planning this event on MLK Day?
I find it very disrespectful. And also, MLK was a rabid Zionist. He was very pro-Israel. And to do that on the day where we observe his birthday is a way to diminish the messaging that he brought. MLK Day, it's supposed to be, or it is, a civic holiday. And it teaches kids, supposed to teach kids about moral leadership, civil rights, but also unity. When an event uses that day to spotlight a modern foreign conflict, especially with the loaded framing, I think families will reasonably need to ask, is this education or is this activism? Using MLK's legacy for moral cover, I think that's the core controversy.
And Aaron, as we are celebrating Martin Luther King Day, maybe you could go in a little bit deeper on Dr. King's views. You mentioned he was a Zionist, but in this view of a colorblind society and why it's so important for educators to honor today.
MLK, he preached about, like I said, unity. A lot of people now say that we get our strength from diversity. MLK was about unifying, not looking at people for the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Education, as he proposed, should also answer three big questions. How do I get here? Why am I here? And where am I going? That means teaching history, teaching civics, but also he was about teaching character and purpose and responsibility. If a lesson can't meet that standard, develop mentally, academically, and then morally, it's not being taught in the face of what Dr. King believed in, and it doesn't belong in front of kids.
We appreciate you sharing your insights as well as sharing the legacy of Dr. King. Aaron Boxer, former special education teacher and the CEO of Diversified Education Services. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Gary.
And coming up, astronauts will soon take flight for a slingshot around the moon for the first time in half a century. NASA's giant new moon rocket headed to the launch pad over the weekend in preparation for takeoff. More on that after this. That is exciting. Welcome
back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. A winter storm brought brief snow to parts of Florida's Panhandle yesterday. That's the second year in a row that they've received snow. The system is tied to a powerful Arctic blast. It's now spreading across much of the country. It's bringing heavy snow, strong winds, some of the coldest temperatures of the season. Hundreds of flights are already canceled across New York and New Jersey. And tensions over Greenland are escalating. President Trump has threatened new tariffs on European countries fighting U.S. efforts to acquire the territory. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called Greenland essential to U.S. national security, while EU leaders held emergency talks. And a federal investigation is now underway after anti-ICE protesters disrupted a Sunday church service in St. Paul, Minnesota. Demonstrators stormed a Baptist church during worship, chanting "Justice for Renee Good" and alleging a pastor has ties to ICE. The incident comes as immigration tensions escalate, with reports that the Pentagon has ordered 1,500 troops to prepare for possible deployment to Minnesota. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. And NASA's giant new moon rocket headed to the launch pad Saturday in preparation for astronauts' first lunar fly-around in more than half a century. The out and back trip could blast off as early as February. Here's a closer look.
The 322-foot rocket began its slow 4-mile creep from Kennedy Space Center's Vehicle Assembly Building at daybreak, rumbling along at just 1 mile per hour. Thousands of Space Center workers and their families gathered in the pre-dawn chill to witness the long-awaited event, delayed for years. They huddled together ahead of the Space Launch System rocket's exit from the building, built in the 1960s to accommodate the Saturn V rockets that sent 24 astronauts to the moon during the Apollo program. The cheering crowd was led by NASA's new administrator, Jared Isaacman, and all 4 astronauts assigned to the mission.
And why are we doing this? We are doing this to fulfill a promise to the American people that we will return to the moon. A promise to all of the pioneers, the engineers, the scientists, the astronauts, the researchers from the 1960s, of which they laid the foundation that we are standing upon right now.
They are so fired up that we are headed back to the moon. They are so fired up that we're going on to Mars. They just want to see humans as far away from Earth as possible, discovering the unknown.
Weighing in at 11 million pounds, the Space Launch System rocket and Orion crew capsule on top made the move aboard a massive transporter that was used during the Apollo and Shuttle eras. It was upgraded for the SLS rocket's extra heft. The first and only other SLS launch, which sent an empty Orion capsule into orbit around the moon, took place back in November 2022.
Now, over time, launching missions like this, we are going to learn a lot. And the vehicle architecture will change. And as it changes, we should be able to undertake repeatable, affordable missions to and from the moon.
Heat shield damage and other capsule problems during the initial test flight required extensive analyses and tests, pushing back the first crew moonshot until now. The astronauts won't orbit the moon or even land on it. That giant leap will come on the 3rd flight in the Artemis lineup a few years from now. Crew Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, longtime NASA astronauts with spaceflight experience, will be joined on the 10-day mission by Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, a former fighter pilot awaiting his first rocket ride. They will be the first people to fly to the moon since Apollo 17's Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt closed out the triumphant lunar landing program in 1972. 12 astronauts strolled along the lunar surface, beginning with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin in 1969. NASA is waiting to conduct a fueling test of the SLS rocket on the pad in early February before confirming a launch date.
I know the teams are prepared. I know this crew is prepared.
The space agency has only 5 days to launch in the first half of February before bumping into March.
And a wild NFL playoff finish sends the Rams to the NFC title game, while college football gets one of the most unexpected championship matchups ever this evening.
Meanwhile, a young mother leaves the corporate world behind to chase her passion for baking. How a Paris native found safety, inspiration, and success in Prague. After this. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. The Los Angeles Rams are one win from the Super Bowl after surviving a dramatic scare in Chicago.
We're going to talk football now, aren't we?
Yes.
That's right. The Rams, they beat the Bears 2017 in a thrilling overtime game that advances them to the NFC Championship game.
So Chicago rookie quarterback Caleb Williams forced overtime with a stunning last-minute touchdown pass, but he threw an interception on the Bears' first possession of overtime. That set up a 42-yard game-winning field goal by Harrison Mevis, sending Los Angeles to a title matchup next week in Seattle.
That's right. Meanwhile, college football crowns an unlikely champion this evening. The Indiana Hoosiers and the Miami Hurricanes meet for the national title after both began the season as 100-1 long shots. Indiana is led by Heisman-winning quarterback Fernando Mendoza, who will return to his native Miami. Meanwhile, the Miami Hurricanes return to the title stage behind their head coach Mario Cristobal.
President Trump will attend the game at Hard Rock Stadium along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, prompting heightened security and traffic restrictions around the stadium.
I'd have to say, in all of sport, I have never seen a turnaround of a sporting program as we've seen with the Indiana Hoosiers, though. Curt Cignetti, he was coaching a very small school, James Madison, just 3 years ago. He goes to one of the two hardest conferences in the Big Ten, and he's beat everybody this year. He beat my beloved Penn State Nittany Lions at home in a whiteout game. He beat Oregon twice, once in Oregon. He beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship and embarrassed Alabama. And I would have to say, with the Heisman on his team, again, might have mud on my face, but I'm going to predict a victory for the Hoosiers and what would be the crowning achievement in something that really has never been seen in sports. Indiana was the worst team out of the 133 college football teams in the history of the game. And now he's at the doorstep of history this evening. Very exciting.
That is incredible. We'll be watching. All right, next up, a young mom leaves the corporate world behind to follow her passion for baking.
NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with the owner of Oh La La Cakes about turning a lifelong love of sweets into a business.
Sophia Plachki makes French-inspired homemade desserts and says her passion for cooking began early on.
Being always in the kitchen with my mom, by myself, I've always loved cooking. And then, and baking was my specialty because I really love food myself, especially sweets, cake.
Originally from Paris, Plachki says she loved the food and culture, but she didn't feel safe. But in Prague, Plachki felt much safer. She decided to move to Prague and says the Czech capital has a lot more to offer besides safety.
It's amazing. The city itself, it's like a museum. I used to live in the city center, so I just love going outside and walking for hours. Like there's so many beautiful places, like Old Town Square, the Charles Bridge, and so many places to visit.
She kept baking at home, often sending her desserts to work with her husband.
And all the time he was coming back and telling me, everybody loved your cake, they finished all the cake. Always I had very good feedbacks about what I was doing. Sometimes I was just trying new recipes and bringing it to his work, and everybody really liked it, or bringing it to my work and everybody really liked it. So at one point I just thought, like, okay, why not doing my passion.
Not long after the birth of her child, she opened Oh La La Cakes.
When I was looking for a name for this, my husband was just telling me, you need to call it Oh La La because this is something that you're always saying, and it just means like Oh La La, it's so good, or Oh La La, I like this.
Today, Plachki is building more than a bakery. She's building a community, sharing life as a new mom, business owner, and homemaker.
And if I can touch some women also who wants to follow their dream but are a bit shy, or they don't know, or they're thinking they don't have time, or they don't know how to use the time, this is everything that I want to share. My cakes, but also the life, and try to motivate women.
And her message is simple.
The heart of my message is just follow your dreams. That you are a mom or a student or a single mom, or just follow your dreams. Be who you want to be. And you can do it. If I can, everybody can.
You can find Sophia Plachki and her wonderful treats on Instagram at OLALACakes_Prague. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
So sweet. And I always love the reports by Daniel. But right here, you know, this message of wanting to share what she's learned with everybody else. They say the secret ingredient to a really good meal.
Follow your passion, right?
Well, is love. And she's got
Love.
it there for every, you know, she's got that broader mission as well. So
She
it's
likes
all
baking.
palpable.
And I like eating. So it works out well.
So, folks, if you get a chance to try some of those, I recommend it.
Well, look, if you want more football stories or you want more baking stories,
Right.
we won't know unless you send us an email and tell us what you want to see us cover. That email is goodmorning@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you.
And of course, round-the-clock original news coverage, you can always watch us live at ntd.com/live or on our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dunst. Have a great day.